Hello and welcome to a RackForms techniques demo. In this job, we're going to be talking about how we use RackForms to give our users the ability to select which payment provider they want. So there are two main ways that we can do this. There is a simple way, and then there's a slightly more advanced way. And there's uses for both. So first, let's build our skeleton of the form. So I'm going to have a basic select page, and I'm going to add an e-commerce item to this. And then I'm going to have two confirmation pages, right? One of the confirmation pages is going to be for PayPal, and then the other one is going to be, in this case, for, let's say, Stripe. Now, to these confirmation pages, we treat them as if it was a standard form with only one confirmation page. So on this confirmation page, because this is the one that's going to process PayPal, I'll add my ecom item to this page, and the transaction vendor here can stay at its default PayPal, but I will select my process this field as ecom1. If you've never actually seen how RackForms does this, we actually have a really flexible system where we can have multiple payment items on one page, and we can actually have different modules to handle each one of them. So it's a really flexible system, but it does require that we select under, once again, process this field, which field we're processing. At any rate, then, under my Stripe page, I'll do the exact same thing. I'll put an e-commerce item on the page. For transaction vendor, I'll actually now change this to Stripe. And for process this field, I'm going to put, once again, ecom1. Okay, so that is a basic setup. So now the question then becomes, how do we actually select which one of these two pages that we go to? And again, there's an easy way and a slightly more advanced way. First, the easy way. I'm going to go back up to my form page, and I add two submit buttons to my page. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a feature called submit route to say which of these two pages we're going to go to. Before I do that, though, I'm going to name my pages something more specific. So in this particular case, this page, our PayPal page, is just named page1.php. So let's change this to, appropriately enough, PayPal. For this guy, I'm going to call this one, once again, appropriately enough, stripe.php. Right? So now we have two pages, paypal.php and stripe.php. And now for this, I'm going to change my label. So in this case, I'll call this PayPal. And for this one, I'll call Stripe. And we're essentially all set up now. For the first one, I'm going to say for its submit route, I'm going to use a quick select list right here to say, hey, when somebody clicks on you, go to paypal.php. For the Stripe one, I'm going to say, go to stripe.php. So just a real quick word about submit route. The basic idea is usually when we create a submit button, that is, for example, if I just add one right here, we don't have a submit route set, which means that when I click this button, when I'm running the form, I'm going to go to whatever the next page in the form sequence is. So in this case, if I were to click submit here, I'm just going to go to the next page, which is PayPal. The trick is, of course, is that we actually want to select between these two. So for example, in this case, when I click Stripe, I want to go to stripe.php. So again, this is blank by default, but this is how we override the default behavior. With that said, then, that's basically it. So now if I click PayPal, I'm going to go to the PayPal page. And if I click Stripe, I'm going to go to the Stripe page. So very simple. As I said, though, there is a slightly more advanced way of doing this, and that's what we'll look at right now. So the reason why we might want a more advanced method is because we actually use, instead of multiple payment providers to give our users the option, but because we want that option. So a classic example of that is we have a really expensive item on this site and a not so expensive item. The expensive item is going to be sold through PayPal. Maybe there's some specific reason for that, or maybe you just like PayPal's rates better. It doesn't really matter to the end user which technique we use, but it matters to us for fees and that type of stuff. And so we would look at our form and we would use the logic that I'm about to show you to say if this particular item was sold, we're going to go to the PayPal page. However, if that wasn't selected, we'll go to the Stripe page because maybe we like their rates better for smaller items. And so here is a generic description of how we would do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a select item to the form. And in this case, it's going to be select your payment provider. And it's going to have two options. So I'm going to scroll down to its item options here, and I'm going to select for the first one, of course, PayPal, and the next one, Stripe. Then I'm going to add a submit button. So as a last touch, I'm actually going to call the field right here. So under basic attributes, I'm going to call this payment method. You're going to see why in just a second. So under the submit button then, you'll notice if I scroll down, once again, our basic attributes, here's where our submit route logic was, right? So this is a simple way to select different pages to go through when they're clicked on. We also have a more advanced method that's called conditional processing. So under conditional processing, I have something called the conditional route statement. And this is essentially like meta PHP, and that we can actually get incredibly specific now and write if statements that actually are run through when the form is submitted. In this particular case then, I want to say if, and then I use a little shortcut here, payment method is equal to PayPal. And again, if you're a PHP coder, you're going to actually think this looks pretty simple right here, or I should say pretty familiar. In other words, we're using an if statement. We're using single ticks here to wrap string quotes. We're also using braces. But if payment method is equal to PayPal, we're going to go to paypal.php. Or else go to stripe.php. Now we do have videos and documentation on how this works. So for the specifics, I would check on that. But the basic idea here is, once again, it's like pseudo PHP with some token helpers. So we want to keep this as simple as we can. So instead of saying issuing, if you're a programmer, a header block, we just say go to, and we'll actually put the header statement in there for you. But the idea here is we're using essentially like pseudocode here. Now the reason why this is nice is, again, this gives you incredible power to get very specific. So again, the example I used before was if we have a really expensive item, we can actually look at a form field, and if that form field has been selected, or if there's a value for that, or let's say we are keeping a total on this page of the payment amount. If the amount is over $1,000, for example, so we could have a hidden field that says it's called total amount, for example. If total amount is over 1,000, and again, this would be a hidden field that we'd be keeping track of programmatically. If total amount is greater than, or let's say less than 1,000, go to paypal.php, else go to stripe.php. Now this is incredibly, once again, powerful because it gives us as developers unlimited access and unlimited control over how this stuff works. Again, for most scenarios, just using submit route is fine. But there are going to be those times when we need to get very specific. That's what conditional routes are exactly built for. So anyway, that is our quick look then at how we can give our users the ability to select different payment vendors. We looked at two methods. The first was using submit routes, very simple. The second is using conditional route statements, which, while more powerful, are also a little bit more difficult to use, so it helps to check the documentation on those. Of course, if you have any questions about this or anything else that you see on our blog or RackForms.com, please feel free to call us. Our number is at the top of the website, or drop us an email at info@rackforms.com. Thanks for watching.